Hello and welcome. It's Joanne from Scrapbook Warehouse. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to be making this card using our distress inks and this beautiful butterfly stamp by 49th and Market. This one here. So we're going to play with our distress inks, and I have two other cards here that I've done with different colors and a little bit more of a different technique with stencils. And here is another card where I embossed in white using the same stamp. So we will be doing just the panels today, but we are going to actually do the whole card of this one. So we'll get started. So I'm using multimedia, Ranger multimedia paper, and if the Canson watercolor paper will work, any watercolor paper will work as long as it's on the smooth side. We'll get started, and today for this card we're going to use, one is ice spruce, the other one is broken china, and the other one is cracked pistachio. Now don't overthink these inks. We're just going to get some color on our paper. So I'm just going to perhaps use two colors to start. And you do have to push a little harder on your mat with these pads. So I'm going to spray, and you will see, look how beautiful those colors are. So I'm using ice spruce and broken china, and I'm just going to lay my paper in it, and I usually just let it lie there until one of the corners turn up, and then I'll pick it up, and here we go. Now don't worry about what it looks like at this point. I'm not going to add any more water. I'm just going to heat dry this, and then we'll be adding more layers. Now when you're using these Oxide inks, or the distress inks for that matter, it's very, very important that your card is dry in between layers. And that way it won't turn muddy. So I'll just clean up here. Now we can start by adding cracked pistachio. We can do a little more of the broken china. Give it a mist. And then you can start by, if you want, you can swish it around, put it down, pick it up. That's it. Okay. And I will be back. I'm going to dry this second layer. Now you can see how these colors are layering on top of one another. They don't go muddy. These colors will just, each layer sits on top of each layer. And this is the beauty of these distress inks. So I will clean this off. I'm going to add a little bit more blue. And don't worry about white spaces either. They're often, they can create a lot of interest. Now at this point, I'll mist, and I will put some more, I'll dip it here. You see how it just sits beautifully on top of that? They just don't go muddy. It is, and you can do as many layers as you like. And you can use whatever colors you like. So I'm going to dry this in a moment, but I'm going to now start spritzing. And this is when you start, when your inks actually oxidize and create really incredibly beautiful backgrounds. So I'll be back. I'm going to dry this layer. So once you have that completely dry, you take a look at your piece and you think, okay, well, actually, I think I might want a little bit more green here. And you can go on and on and on, adding colors galore. And I tell you, they will not get muddy. So I'll just mist this green. That's what I'm looking for. So that is absolutely stunning. So I'm going to dry this, and then I'm going to come back and use one more color, and it will be, we can mix these inks. So I will be using the regular Distress Spice Marmalade. Incredibly, incredibly fun to use. I'll be back after I dry. So there we have this panel, and I'm now going to take this regular Distress Spice Marmalade and I'm going to smoosh it on my mat. I'm going to give it a mist. And I just want orange just a little bit through here. So I'll dip that. You see how vibrant, and if you have white spaces on your panel, the orange really stands out. So yes, so this is so fun to do. I hope you enjoy them as much as I do. And there we have this beautiful panel. I'm going to actually use a background stamp and add some interest to this card. If you like, you can still put water drops on here, but make sure you dry it in between. So there we have it. Now I'm going to bring in my Vintage Photo Oxide ink, and I'm using a background script stamp. You can pick whatever background stamp you like, and what it does, it's very subtle. It's just going to add a little bit of dimension to the background. So I'm just, these Oxide inks stamp beautifully as well. So I'm just sort of randomly going over my stamp with my Vintage Photo. And you don't have to be too precise. I'm just going to put my paper on top of the stamp, rub it a bit, and there you have it. I might go a little bit over here. And there. See? So now I'm going to just dry this a little bit because the Oxide inks stay wet for quite some time, and we're going to do some embossing on top of this panel. So I'm just going to make sure this is really, really dry. So now we're going to bring in my Misty. And we will be using this butterfly stamp, and we'll be using fly and papillon. So I'm going to and I will place my stamp here, and I'll put this word down here and this one up here, and then I will pick those up. And now I'm going to use my embossing buddy, and I'm quite liberal with it. This is why it's very important to make sure your panel is dry. So I'm going to use this VersaFine black ink and ink up my stamps. Close it up. Beauty of the Misty, we can go back. I probably don't really have to, but I'm going to, just to make sure that the embossing powder gets all over that. So we'll close that again. There, that's better. Okay, so just move this. We'll put our black embossing powder on this panel. Yes, that's pretty good. Okay, I'm going to heat dry this. I'm first going to return this embossing powder into its container. And I will heat set this and I will be back with you. So there we have this panel. I will just take my paper towel and just wipe off some of that embossing buddy powder. So now with this panel, you can see here, use my blending tool from Tim Holtz, and I'm going to do the edges. It just sort of pulls everything forward. So I will do that using my vintage photo. It just kind of gives it a little bit of dimension. And these inks blend beautifully, so I'll start off my mat and just go around like so. Like so. So now, it's a personal choice. You can embellish your panel any way you like with sequins or clear drops. I'm just going to actually use my watercolor, my Zig watercolor pen. And the color of this is orange, just plain orange. And I'm just going to bring a little bit of this color into the butterfly. And then I'm going to take my little paintbrush and just add a little bit of water to that. Just like so. And it just pulls in the orange from the background. I love how this spice marmalade, the regular distress, how it just jumps. It's so fun to use. And you know, the other distress, the bright colors, Salty Ocean and Broken China, you can mix and match these inks and really, truly, just practice, practice, practice. It's endless what you can do with these inks. And I was just so pleased to learn that I actually can use them both together. So it doesn't get better than that. Now, if you want, you can spritz that more. I will tell you that when I spritz on the Oxide inks, I do not take a paper towel. You can, or a baby wipe, you can. But I find it pulls off too much ink. So I just spritz and dry. So there we have our panel. And I think what I'll do, maybe add a little bit more vintage photo. You could always go over the vintage photo too with walnut stain. I might just do that so you can see how they layer when you blend them. So these colors blend so well together. It's amazing. So once again, I will start off the paper But you see how that just absolutely gives it depth? And that's over top of the vintage photo. There's no lines. They just blend beautifully. Really super easy to use. And this step is optional. You do not have to go around the edges if you choose not to. I just find it just sort of adds to the vintage look of the card. So there you go. Now we're going to mount this panel on black. And I find when you use the Oxide inks and you mount it on black, you can see right away just how that pops. It just brings everything to the forefront. Okay, so I'm going to run some tape on this. Like so. And then I'm going to put this panel on top of the orange, and you can see right away how that just pulls the spice marmalade. So I'll quickly adhere that. Now you have the option, if you like, you can always use foam tape if you want to add that much more dimension to your card. I don't think it really needs it, but you go ahead if you want this, you know, to pop up. And then we'll mount it to our base, and then our card is done. So I'll quickly mount this. And there you go. You have a lovely, lovely card. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are just going to do the panel. I want to show you how I did this. I used Tim Holtz stencils, the mini stencils. They're wonderful for these kind of techniques. We used the same stamp, which I'll emboss, but I did this background strictly by blending, and I'm going to show you how we do this. So we will take a panel, and the colors I used in this one was Vintage Photo, Fired Brick, and Walnut Stain. An interesting combination, quite dramatic, but I blended them with the blending tools. So we will start with Vintage Photo. So here's the card we're going to do. So I'm going to use Vintage Photo up here. I did it in kind of like thirds. Now if you watch, you can just, as you go over and over blending this color, you see your brush marks literally disappear. And you can go as light or as dark as you want. I went quite heavy. It's a personal preference. But to get this dramatic effect, it needs to be quite deep. See how beautifully that goes on the paper? It's just like butter. It's so smooth. Really, really, really nice. So I'm just going to come down a little bit more. And we can always go back and darken it if we want. I'm going to go on to my next color, which is Fired Brick. And I will start by working into the Vintage Photo. So I'll start off the paper here, and I will start working up into the Vintage Photo. And you just get a very, very gradual blend. It really is lovely. And you just go back over and over and over until you're happy with it. Till you get it the way you like. I love this Fired Brick. And the opacity of these inks are just so lovely. whereas the regular distress inks are way more transparent. So even when you combine the two, you get an absolute gorgeous color happening. Okay, so I'm going to start at the bottom, turn my paper upside down, and then I'm going to use my walnut stain. And then same thing, I'm going to work into the fired brick. So I'll start off the paper and blend up into that fired brick. Now you can use any color combination of inks you like. I've done a springy colored one, you know, with light colors. Really, really nice to use. Now you can see where the walnut stain is coming up into the fired brick. I'm going to go back in there with my fired brick, and they will just blend. It'll just smooth right out. So you can make it as intense as you like. There we go. You see how lovely those are together? I think I will go back now and add some more vintage photo. And you can just keep doing this over and over as much as you like. And they just gradually get darker. Really beautiful, beautiful blends with these inks. There we go. So I think that will do for this one. I'm going to now bring in a stencil. Tim Holtz little mini stencils. Love them. So I'm going to use the wood grain for this one. The wood grain stencil. And I'm not going to adhere my paper. I'm just going to hold it. And I'm going to take a baby wipe, and I'm just going to move and twist, pat and twist, pat and twist. And you can see it's literally lifting up the ink. So just pat and twist. This is a very intricate stencil. I don't want to rip it, so I just plunk it down, and you can see the ink coming up. And you can take as much or as little of the ink off as you like. Like that. It's very effective. So I'm just going to give this a little bit of a heat dry, and I'll be back. There we go. Now I think I want some watermarks on here, so I think I'll just give it a couple of shots. Anyway, that's the finished panel. If you prefer to color your butterfly, you can use watercolor markers. You can use your Wink of Stella pens. You can add glitter. You can do whatever you like with these inks. Just exactly like before with the distress inks. You can embellish the way you like. You can put sequins once again. You could add more water spritzes on it. So here we have the two cards, and every time you do a card, they're always different, but the color combinations are fabulous. So that's with Oxide inks and a background stamp. And then here's the one we did, the panel, using Tim Holtz stencils. And then there's this one, it's a little softer, and again using a stencil, and 2-3 butterflies. Thank you for watching, and I hope this gives you some inspiration to play with oxides.